gray light of a Zurich dawn, luxury usually meets silence. But on May 27, 2015, the Bor au Lac Hotel, a sanctuary for the world's most powerful football executives, became the stage for a geopolitical earthquake. Swiss police officers, acting on behalf of the United States Department of Justice, moved through the corridors with white sheets to shield the identities of those they were detaining. It was a scene straight from a high-stakes thriller, yet the targets weren't criminal kingpins. They were the men who ran the world's most popular sport. 7 top officials, including Vice Presidents Jeffrey Webb and Eugenio Figueiredo, were led away in handcuffs. The indictment named 14 individuals in a scheme involving racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracies totaling over $150 million. This was the moment the shadow empire of FIFA began to crumble, just days before Sepp Blatter was set to seek another term as president. The raid was the culmination of years of secret surveillance, targeting a culture that treated the world's game as a private piggy bank. To understand how football reached this breaking point, we must look back at how a modest sports association transformed into a billion-dollar monolith. For decades, FIFA operated as a Swiss-based nonprofit, a status that granted it minimal oversight and significant tax advantages while it generated revenue comparable to major multinational corporations. This era of hyper-commercialization began under João Havelange, who served as president from 1974 to 1998. Havelange saw the untapped potential of football as a global product and shifted the focus from the pitch to the boardroom. He transitioned the sport into a commercial juggernaut, signing massive deals with global sponsors and television networks. When Sepp Blatter, Havelange's protege, took the reins in 1998, he perfected the art of institutional power through a complex web of patronage. Blatter consolidated his influence through the goal development programs, ostensibly for infrastructure, but often used to secure political support. This structure turned the game into a mechanism for wealth distribution among a select few. Under the one nation, one vote system, the vote of a tiny island nation carried the same weight as that of a global football powerhouse like Germany or Brazil. By securing the loyalty of these smaller nations through financial grants, Blatter created an untouchable voting bloc that ensured his reign remained unchallenged for 17 years. This was a political machine fueled by the explosion of television rights that turned FIFA into a billion-dollar entity. But beneath the surface of record-breaking World Cup profits, the rot was already spreading. Rumors of corruption were the background noise of the Blatter era. The ISL scandal in the early 2000s had hinted at a systemic culture of kickbacks, where marketing firms paid bribes to secure lucrative contracts. However, the true catalyst for the empire's downfall was the suspicious double vote in December 2010. In a single afternoon, FIFA awarded the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 edition to Qatar. The decision stunned the sporting world and sparked immediate allegations of foul play. How could a desert nation with no existing football infrastructure beat out global competitors? Investigative journalists like Andrew Jennings and the team at the Sunday Times began digging into the mechanics of the bidding process, uncovering a web of secret deals, luxury gifts, and offshore accounts. International outrage was deafening. Yet FIFA's leadership remained defiant, dismissing reports as biased. They believed they were beyond the reach of any national law. Little did they know that Loretta Lynch and the FBI were already piecing together a map of the Shadow Empire's financial arteries. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This was the beginning of the end for the old guard. The investigation moved to the courtroom, and the world was about to see just how deep the rabbit hole went. The Shadow Empire's fall was not merely the result of a single morning raid. It was the product of a patient, meticulous investigation fueled by an unlikely informant within the inner sanctum. This key figure was Chuck Blazer, a man once known as Mr. 10%, for the commissions he demanded on every deal he brokered for North American soccer. Blatter was the personification of FIFA's excess, a man of massive proportions who lived a life of staggering opulence in New York City. He famously maintained 2 luxury apartments in Trump Tower, one of which was reportedly reserved exclusively for his cats. However, his high-flying lifestyle was built on a foundation of tax evasion. When the IRS and FBI finally caught up with him on a Manhattan sidewalk, they presented him with a stark ultimatum: spend the rest of his life in prison, or become their eyes and ears inside the world of international football. Blatter chose to cooperate, becoming a high-level mole who recorded meetings with his colleagues using a microphone hidden in a keychain. Even during the 2012 London Olympics, the evidence Blatter provided allowed the U.S. Department of Justice to build a case unlike any other in sporting history. Led by Attorney General Loretta Lynch, federal investigators didn't view FIFA as a simple international nonprofit. Instead, they treated it as a criminal enterprise. To dismantle the hierarchy, they employed the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO. This legal strategy is most famously used to take down mafia families by proving that a series of individual crimes are actually part of a coordinated, long-term criminal conspiracy. Because the conspirators had used American banks and internet servers to move their ill-gotten gains, the DOJ claimed the legal right to pursue them, regardless of where the bribes were paid. They traced a dizzying web of financial records that transformed vague rumors into hard facts, mapping the movement of millions across global borders. At the heart of the corruption were the media and marketing rights for the game's most prestigious tournaments. Major sports marketing firms, most notably the Traffic Group, became the engines of this bribery machine. These companies would pay tens of millions of dollars to secure the exclusive rights to broadcast and promote events like the Copa America and the CONCACAF Gold Cup. These were not standard commercial negotiations. They were carefully orchestrated schemes where consultancy fees served as a thin veil for massive kickbacks. The money flowed through offshore accounts and shell companies, ensuring that the officials who signed the contracts received a personal cut of the billion-dollar football pie. This pay-to-play system dictated which companies could access the world's most passionate audience, creating a closed loop of wealth for a select elite. One of the most damning pieces of evidence involved the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Investigators uncovered a $10 million payment sent from FIFA accounts that was allegedly a bribe to secure votes for the first African-hosted tournament. The money was funneled through a FIFA account in Zurich to accounts controlled by Jack Warner, a powerful official from Trinidad and Tobago. While the official explanation was that the funds were intended for diaspora support in the Caribbean, the reality was far more cynical. This systemic rot eventually reached the very peak of the organization, involving a disloyal payment that would bring down the sport's 2 most powerful men. In 2011, Sepp Blatter authorized a payment of 2 million Swiss francs to Michel Platini, the legendary French footballer and then head of UEFA. The lack of a formal written contract for this transfer, which they claimed was back pay for work performed years earlier, became the smoking gun that the ethics committee used to ban both Blatter and his presumed successor, Platini, from the game. As the indictments were unsealed, the initial reaction from FIFA was one of indignant denial. They attempted to frame the organization as an injured party, claiming they were the victims of a few rogue actors rather than a corrupt system. Sepp Blatter, displaying his characteristic defiance, actually went ahead with the FIFA presidential election just days after the Zurich raid. He secured enough support from federations in Africa and Asia to win another term, appearing to have survived the storm. However, the victory was short-lived as the weight of the investigation and sponsor pressure became unbearable. Only 4 days after his re-election, in a dramatic televised address from the home of world football, Blatter announced he would step down. The announcement sent shockwaves through the global football community, revealing a deep rift. While European federations within UEFA celebrated the end of an era, many leaders in the AFC and CAF viewed the investigation as a Western-led coup against their own influence. The Shadow Empire was leaderless, and the world was left wondering if the corruption could ever truly be purged from the pitch. The departure of Sepp Blatter was just the first domino to fall in a cascading collapse of the old guard. The global football community watched in disbelief as decades of power vanished overnight. What followed was a purge of unprecedented scale in the world of sports. The Ethics Committee began handing out lifetime bans with clinical efficiency. Key figures who had dictated the flow of global football for decades found themselves persona non grata. Jack Warner, the power broker from Trinidad and Tobago, faced a permanent ban and a relentless extradition battle with the United States. In South America, the giants of CONMEBOL were similarly dismantled. Ricardo Teixeira and Nicolas Leoz, men personifying the untouchable executive, were brought to account, their names forever tied to the massive embezzlement uncovered by the FBI. The toxicity of the FIFA brand became so potent that it began to corrode the organization's financial bedrock. Long-term corporate partners, who for years turned a blind eye to the whispers of corruption for the sake of the World Cup's reach, could no longer ignore the headlines. Global giants like Sony and Emirates allowed contracts to expire, unwilling to associate with arrested officials shielded by bedsheets at the Bor Lac. This commercial exodus forced the organization into an existential crisis. This financial vacuum threatened the very infrastructure of the sport. Without the trust of the corporate world, the billion-dollar Shadow Empire faced the real prospect of bankruptcy. In an attempt to save itself, the organization established the FIFA Reform Committee in 2016. These reforms were intended to act as a permanent firewall against future corruption. The goal was to dismantle the culture of patronage that João Havelange had built and Sepp Blatter had perfected. Strict term limits and salary transparency were mandated. The executive committee became the FIFA Council, designed to distribute power and prevent the concentration of influence that fueled the Shadow Empire for so long. However, the fallout created deep geopolitical fractures. In many parts of the world, the U.S. intervention was viewed as an act of sporting imperialism. Critics argued there was a distinct Western bias, suggesting American authorities acted because they were political sore losers after failing to secure the 2022 World Cup. They viewed the legal actions as a way to undermine the shifting of football's center of gravity away from traditional Western powers. Yet, for advocacy groups like Transparency International, the focus remained on the human cost. The link between the suspicious 2010 bidding process and the human rights crisis in Qatar became a focal point of condemnation. The world began to realize that the corruption wasn't just in the boardroom, but built into the very concrete of the stadiums. The construction of massive stadiums led to reports of horrific, life-threatening labor conditions and migrant worker deaths. To these critics, the Shadow Empire wasn't just about stolen millions. It was about a system that prioritized profit over human lives and the integrity of the beautiful game. As the dust settled, Gianni Infantino emerged to lead FIFA into its new era. His presidency is marketed as a clean break, but the transition remains a subject of debate. While Infantino has modernized operations and overseen a massive expansion of the World Cup, skeptics argue the fundamental DNA remains insulated. They point to ongoing legal battles in Switzerland and the United States as evidence that the ghosts of the past are still present. The legacy of the FIFA files is a permanent reminder of how easily the world's sport can be manipulated without oversight. The battle to keep the game clean is far from over. The Shadow Empire's fall proved no one is untouchable, but it also highlighted the fragility of the sport's soul. As we look toward future tournaments, the question of whether true change has taken root remains unanswered. Every goal scored now carries the weight of this history, challenging fans to demand a future where transparency is a reality. The long shadow of Zurich remains a constant warning that the price of the beautiful game must never again be its own integrity.